Oh, that is nice. That is lovely. Hello to all my lovely sugar babies out there. You're watching a new episode of ElliXia's Discography Dives, a series in which we delve into the discographies of some of my favourite artists. Now we have come to the end of a series about one of my favourite ever acts and one of the best girl groups to come out of the UK, and that is the Sugababes. Over the last couple of months, I've been talking about each of the Sugababes studio albums, and this episode is going to be a roundup of all the sort of little extra bits that the Sugababes have done, sometimes in between the previous albums, but mostly what's come after the last album to date, which was Sweet 7. There's been quite a few bits and pieces here and there, so I will give a quick rundown as to what we are going to discuss in today's episode. Firstly, we are going to be covering the greatest hits. Secondly, we will be covering solo albums. Thirdly, we will be talking about the years between Sweet 7 to present day, because there was a little bit of activity here and there. Unfortunately, there is no physical record of that, so let's just pretend this drink coaster is an album or something. And fourthly, we will be discussing the whole reason for this series in the first place, which is the 2021 20th anniversary re-release of One Touch. Oh, she is nice, isn't she? Oh, look at that. And as you might have gathered, that is quite a lot to get through in what is hopefully not too long of a video. So let's get cracking. And before we delve into any of that, my name is ElliXia Q Valentine, of course. Like and subscribe, leave a comment if you like the video, don't bother if you didn't like the video, and do all those nice things. Follow me on all the socials as well. You can find links to my social media in the description as well. Today's look is inspired, well, by, the Sugababes. This is a t-shirt that I've got with the album when it came out. And I'm keeping it quite simple, very comfy. This is probably the comfiest look I've ever done, actually. So without further ado, grab yourself a cup of Sugababes tea, 3 sugars. Get it? Because there's 3 of them. And let's get started. In terms of greatest hits, we don't actually have that much. We have 2 albums, 2 different compilations. The Sugababes aren't one of those acts where they have like a million different greatest hits with like slightly rearranged track listing and different titles of basically the same record, like several other counterparts may have. We only have 2 greatest hits to speak of this time. Firstly, we have 2006's Overloaded, the Singles Collection, which was released on the 13th of November 2006, and it reached number 3 in the UK Albums Chart. This is a greatest hits album that covers the period from the first album up until Toilet in More Ways. So it covers 4 albums, and it has the majority of the singles from that period. Overloaded featured 2 new songs. The lead single, Easy, which is a nice electronic slut banger, as I like to call it. Easy was the sole single off this album, and it did sort of like moderately okay in the charts. It reached number 8, which is good, but it kind of fell out quite fast. I absolutely love Easy though. Lyrically, it's very, very, very textual, which is something that the Sugababes at that point hadn't really covered. And I think it's kind of done a bit ironically as well, because that was never really their thing, at least not for a few years. The video for Easy features the Sugababes doing choreography in a very, very fancy toilet, which I can only assume and hope was clean. And Easy talks about wanting to fulfill a man's sexual desires. It's quite straightforward. There's a lot of innuendos in the song's lyrics. The weather's nice and wet just south of the border. Got such a pretty kitty boy, I know you want to pet it. I've got a landing strip clear for you at the airport. Filth. The innuendos are like so blatant that I definitely think there's a level of irony among them, because like, it does not take a genius to work out what this song is about. I love Easy though. It starts off kind of like slow and sexy, but the chorus is a massive rush, and I really like that. I can also see why some people don't like it, because yeah, the innuendos are a little bit cringy. So I can totally see why this is not some fans' cup of tea, as it were. The other new song we have on Overloaded is Good to Be Gone. Good to Be Gone is a nice sort of kind of rocky-ish number. It's actually very similar to It Ain't Easy from Toilet in More Ways. Lyrically, it addresses a breakup, which they're very happy to have gone out of. It isn't on my regular rotation necessarily, but then I don't think it's available on Spotify actually in the UK, so maybe that's why. Good to Be Gone was going to be a single actually, but it got scrapped because of Walk This Way, their collaboration with Girls Aloud, which was released around the same sort of time The Good To Be Gone was going to be released. They couldn't fit both in, so that single release had to be scrapped. Which leads us on quite nicely actually to Walk This Way, which is a cover obviously of the Run DMC and Aerosmith song. An absolute classic, and I'll be honest, the Sugababes and Girls Aloud, as much as I love them, they are two of my most favourite girl groups in the world, doesn't come anywhere near as close as how good the original version is. But it's for charity, so it's alright. And the video is pretty fun as well. You know, they're having a little bit of a face-off in the recording studio on the stage. You know, it's camp and it's fun, and it's a charity, so you can get away with a lot when you say it's for charity, can't you? And it gave the girls their fifth #1, so, you know. Yeah, the Overloaded era was quite brief. It did have an arena tour as well that came with it, but there were no further releases from it, and just the 2 new songs before they went straight into the 5th album, Change, which we covered a few weeks back. Our second greatest compilation did not come for another 15 years. In fact, released on the same day as our One Touch Reissue, and that is the Essential Sugababes. I'm very sorry to Spectrum Music, but what is this album cover? Like, what in the Microsoft Paint / PowerPoint? This literally looks like the title slide of a Sugababes PowerPoint presentation that I would have made like back in 2003. So this is the compilation, Essential Sugababes, released on the 1st of October 2021. This supposedly is a greatest hits album that kind of like covers their whole career, except it doesn't, because there is nothing from the first album on here, and there's nothing new. You know those kind of like budget greatest hits compilations that loads of acts release, that probably the acts themselves have no actual involvement in, but it's just a record label cash-in kind of thing? This is definitely one of those kind of affairs. I bought this mostly out of curiosity because I thought, what's it going to look like? Maybe there might be a nice little booklet with, you know, information about each song, but nah, it's just a bunch of CDs. And I guess if you've never had a Sugababes album before, this might be a good introduction, but the track listing is just so weird. Like all of the singles pretty much are on here, with the exception of the ones they released for Siobhan. This has nothing from the first album on there, and I can only assume that's because of record label issues, because the first album was on a different record label to everything else that came after it. It has a nice little graphic of the album artwork that's not in the correct order as well. And the track listing is just messy. Like, it does kind of sound a bit like someone put the Sugababes library on shuffle and was just like, okay, that will do. I'm a completionist, so I do like to have, you know, every record, even though this really, really does not feel like an official Sugababes release, but lo and behold, here it is. So that's the greatest hits out of the way. Not many compilation releases in the Sugababes history, which is honestly quite surprising, because they have so much material that you could quite easily get, you know, there could quite easily be like many clones of this compilation out there. But I'm glad there's not, because, you know, it does feel very like cheap and cash-in like, so I'm glad that they haven't done that. Moving on to subject number 2 today is the solo albums. Now, believe it or not, there's only 3 Sugababes solo albums to be released, which is quite surprising considering that there have been 6 women who have legally been able to call themselves Sugababes in their time. But there's only 3 albums across 2 members, actually. The first Sugababe we are going to discuss solo-wise is Siobhan. Siobhan's first album, Revolution in Me, was released on the 29th of September 2003, and it reached I want to say, I think it was number 117 in the UK albums chart. So not really commercially very successful, but it was very critically acclaimed, and it has its fan base for sure. This is kind of like a mini discography dive, because I'm not going to be talking about every single track on these albums like I do with my normal videos, because we'll be here till Christmas if I do that. So I'm just going to talk about some of the highlights in the album as a whole. Revolution in Me is a really solid debut album. It was released, obviously, 2 years after she had left the Sugababes, not via the toilet window. And you can tell that definitely this was like something of an emancipation record for Siobhan. I mean, in the name Revolution in Me, that to me says it's her breaking away from what she was previously known for. And I definitely think Siobhan wanted to sort of cast off the Sugababes shackles, as it were. Because even though now things are fine with them, back then there was still, you know, I think there was definitely a bit of animosity and some unfinished business, I guess. And Siobhan at the time was quite vocal about how she didn't have a good time as part of the Sugababes as well. So this was definitely an album with the mission to establish her in her own right. To the point where the first single from this album, which was a promo single, was released under the name Shanghai Nobody, which is an anagram of Siobhan Donaghy. Revolution in Me is absolutely fantastic. It's certainly not the kind of album you'd expect somebody who used to be in a girl group to release. It's very, like, dare I say, sort of left field. It's quite experimental for sure. There's definitely an influence of, you know, artists like Kate Bush and Bjork. Kind of a bit like a very watered down version of them. Definitely like, it's almost a bit like those artists but without the eccentricities that they're known for. Revolution in Me though, lets Siobhan's voice soar. She sounds fantastic. Like, I feel like Siobhan could sing the phone book and make it sound amazing. And some of the highlights from this album are the songs Man Without Friends, Overrated, As You Like It, Twist of Fate, Next Human in brackets XY, Dialect, and Iodine. I mean, basically the whole album is really good, but those are some highlights for sure. Moving on to Siobhan's second album, the critically acclaimed Ghosts, and this was released on the 25th of June 2007, and it reached number 92 on the albums chart, so it didn't really do much better than Revolution in Me, unfortunately, which is a real damn shame because this album is really, really solid. It sort of takes the experimentation of Revolution in Me and really just elevates it even more. You've got the fantastic lead single, Don't Give It Up, which is just really wonderful. It's got, again, very sort of Kate Bush vibes, but like less. That's weird, no. Siobhan's voice sounds fantastic. There's so much wonderful songwriting as well. Some definite highlights for this album include So You Say, Sometimes, Medevac. I mean, Medevac in particular is like really effective. It's really like, oh my god, it's dramatic, it's just wonderful. This entire album is so cohesive and works so well as a body of work. And it got critically acclaimed really well at the time of its release, but unfortunately it just didn't do the business sales-wise. And since then, Siobhan's never released another solo album, which is a real shame, but Siobhan herself hasn't really ever expressed the desire to follow up to Ghosts as well. So you've got to respect her wishes, you know. I think after this, Siobhan was sort of a little bit over the music industry until a few years later when the Sugababes reunion began to surface. On to the second Sugababes to release a solo album, and this is of course the second departed member, Mutsia, with her one and only solo album, Real Girl, and this was released on the 4th of June 2007. Something of a coincidence, it was released in the same month as Siobhan's. Come to think of it, they kind of have like the same font for their track listings as well. Conspiracy. I think Mutsia's solo album was probably a lot more hotly anticipated than Siobhan's was. Because when Siobhan left the Sugababes, they hadn't really fully taken off yet, but when Mutsia had left, I think there was probably more eyes on her to do this album. Some definite highlights on this record, you know, the lead single, Real Girl, is really good. Strung Out, It's Not Easy, Not Your Baby is a bop as well. Wonderful does a really wonderful job of showing her vocals off. And of course there's a duet with George Michael, This Is Not Real Love, which is, well, I mean, it's got George Michael on it, what more could you ask for? And there's also a song called B-Boy Baby, which features Amy Winehouse and samples sort of quite heavily the Ronettes' Be My Baby. And it has definitely got some questionable lyrics. One of the lyrics is, I hear his voice and things get wet. It's a little bit like, but I really like, I've got a proper soft spot for that song, so I love it. But the pièce de résistance, if you will, of Mutsia's solo album is Song for Mutsia, in brackets Out of Control, the collaboration with Groove Armada, which is such an absolute banger. Like, proper banger. It's like an instant classic, it's fantastic. And again, like Siobhan, I think Mutsia has that kind of voice where she could sing the phone book and I'd stand. She could release an album of like nursery rhymes and I'd probably buy it. Very ironically actually, Mutsia's solo album sounds very similar to the Catfights and Spotlights album, which came after Mutsia left. Like, some of these songs could quite easily be on that album. Yeah, this is the one and only Mutsia solo album that we have. Mutsia has done quite a few releases since this, you know, with usually as a featured artist on people's songs. And to this day still continues to do so. And I know there are some great songs there as well. It is a shame that Real Girl didn't really do the business chart-wise like it should have. Even though it got off to a really good start, because like the first 2 singles did really well. But for whatever reason, the stars did not align. And that really ends, you know, the Sugababes solo careers, as it were. Keisha was working on a solo album not long after her departure, and even performed a few songs as well. But that project unfortunately got shelved after the original lineup decided to reform. So it was shelved for, you know, a positive reason, but it would have been nice to have had a Keisha solo record for sure. For the other lineups, Heidi's never released a solo album or a solo single, but randomly, somewhat obscurely, there are some pre-Sugababes recordings that Heidi did with Mike Stock of Stockcake and Waterman fame, which are available on Spotify as well. They're okay. They're very much, I mean, what you'd expect of a Mike Stock production, no shade. But they're very obscure. Like, even I, like a massive Sugababes fan, missed that when they were released. Because they were released as part of a compilation of like Mike Stock's greatest hits or something. Yeah, it's very random. it's very random. Amel released a solo track with Tinchy Stryder in 2009, and that actually went to #1, making Amel the only Sugababe to have a #1 single as a solo artist. Amel released a solo single called Summertime, which was a nice little tribute to her sister, and then kind of just vanished off the face of the recording earth. Amel has since leaked quite a few of her solo demos, which are quite decent. So, I mean, they're all available on YouTube, I think, or SoundCloud. So they're worth checking out. And of course, we have Jade, who was in the process of releasing a solo album, even releasing a single and having like a release date before she joined the Sugababes. But of course, that then got put firmly on the shelf once she joined, which again is a real shame because the one single she released, which was called My Man, is a banger. Even if it's a bit of a cheap banger, it's still a banger. And I think Jade had really fantastic potential as a solo artist, and I would have loved to have seen more of that. Of course, she represented Eurovision in 2009 prior to joining the Sugababes as well. And Jade is a fantastic performer. She's got a great voice. She's really pretty, she's gorgeous, she can dance really well. So I think it is a real shame that her potential as a solo star was never really realised. But, you know, from what I can see, she is doing well for herself with West End and doing all sorts of performances. She's even in that biopic as well about Louis Miguel, where she's playing Mariah Carey, which if you'd have told me like years ago that in 2021 we'd be seeing Jade Ewan of Sugababes and Eurovision fame portraying Mariah Carey in a Netflix series, I would have been like, what? Yet, that's the reality we live in. Moving on from the solo releases, we are on to part 3, our drinks coaster section. This is what I like to call the wilderness years, kind of. So both lineups of the Sugababes, both the first and the last lineup, had a couple of releases here and there, had talks of new music that never fully materialised. Going chronologically, Heidi, Jade and Amel in 2011 were planning an 8th album under the Sugababes name, which would have been the first album written specifically for this lineup. They did quite a few interviews, quite a few bits of promo for this album in the summer of 2011, and kept saying things like, oh, the album is coming, you know, yeah, it'll be coming probably like late this year, early next year, that old chestnut. But unfortunately, said album never materialised. The one release that we did get from this album was a song called Freedom, which is, to be fair, I think Freedom is a really good song. And when I heard it, I was like, yeah, I'm really up for a new album with this lineup. I'm willing to give it a chance. I think I was one of the very few fans who still had faith in Sugababes 4.0. Because I said it in the last video, Heidi, Jade and Amel are a very competent trio. They sound great together, so I was like, yeah, in the right hands and with the right direction, they could be fantastic. But I think by this point though, it all just sort of fizzled out, and Freedom was going to be released as the lead single from this mysterious, fabled 8th album. But I think this song kind of failed to really generate a proper buzz outside of like the core fan base. And subsequently it got demoted the week before its release to just be a free download off Amazon as a thank you to the fans. And to me, that translated to this single isn't doing very well and it probably isn't going to reach the top 40, so let's just give it away for free and call it a day. And I think from that point onwards, like, things weren't really looking great for Sugababes 4.0. And then, like, for the next couple of years, we got several, you know, comments of, yeah, the album's coming next year, late next year, from various members, or yeah, we're still together, we're just not doing anything at the moment. Those kind of, you know, empty words. But if you read between the lines, you can see the words, we're not together anymore. And thus, one of the greatest girl groups in UK history went out with quite the whimper, I think. Which is a real shame, because even if, I mean, being realistic, the 8th album probably wouldn't have done very well. I would have bought it, and I probably would have enjoyed it. But I can see why a record label wouldn't want to take the chance. But, funnily enough, late 2011, reports of the original lineup, ElliXia, Keisha and Siobhan, reforming begin to surface. And like throughout the first half of 2012, there's like several reports and comments from different people and producers saying, yeah, we're writing for the original Sugababes. And, you know, it was kind of like the worst kept secret. But in July 2012, they officially relaunched as ElliXia, Keisha, Siobhan. It was a very exciting day, let me tell you that. I was very, very excited to see the three of them together for the first time in 10 years, 11 years at this point. The knowledge that they were working on new material together was really exciting. And this begins a somewhat brief, or maybe very long, depending on how you think about it, chapter in the Sugababes history called the ElliXia, Keisha, Siobhan years. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to call it MKS because ElliXia, Keisha, Siobhan is a bit of a mouthful. MKS were teasing new music quite a bit throughout 2012 and 2013, but it took a very long time before we actually got an official release. After nearly a year of teasing new material, we finally heard the first and, very sadly, only single released in this name, and it was called Flatline. Now, Flatline is amazing. When I first heard it, like, instantly I fell in love with it. It's such a good song. It's one of the best songs to feature. I was going to say one of the best songs that Sugababes put their name to, but technically they didn't put their name to it because they had a different name. But one of their best songs. The harmonies are just perfection. Like, their voices, their three voices just work so wonderfully together. When I heard Flatline, I was just like, oh my god, this is so good. Unfortunately, Flatline also didn't really do the business chart-wise. It reached number 50, and Flatline became the only song that we officially heard from ElliXia, Keisha, Siobhan from MKS. After Flatline's release in September 2013, there was constant like, soon, yes, this is going to be happening. Our album's coming out early next year. We even have the title, we even have the release date, we just can't say it yet. Things like that, ultimately leading to nothing, which, when I tell you how disappointed I was, like, there was never an official, like, our album isn't coming out anymore announcement, but, you know, the constant waiting and the constant, like, you know, being drip-fed little bits of information, usually by people who have claimed to have inside knowledge as opposed to the actual girls themselves, was very frustrating. We weren't completely starved though, because as MKS, they did do a tour where they premiered some new songs, some really fantastic songs as well. We got to hear quite a few previews of material, which unfortunately never amounted to an official release. Now, basically all of these songs, I believe, all of the MKS session songs have since leaked online. I'm not going to discuss that because I like to keep it official in ElliXia's Discography diaries. We don't like to discuss leaks, but I would just say it's a damn shame that we don't have these songs in an official release or in official capacity, because I believe that the best Sugababes album is in the vaults. I mean, I say this, of course, to date, because, you know, who knows what the future holds. So then from like 2014 to 2019, regularly checking, different forums for updates, being drip-fed bits of information, being drip-fed little teasers, as well as the three girls themselves often saying things like it's gonna come soon, etc. After those 5 years, we finally got a bit of progress, and we finally got a release under the name Sugababes, albeit with DJ Spoonie's garage classical orchestra. A wonderful man, DJ Spoonie. I had never heard of him until this point, but I will be forever grateful to him for reintroducing the world to the Sugababes again. He did an album called Garage Classical, or Garage Classical as I would like to say, which was a compilation album of classic garage songs done with an orchestra. And on it was a cover of Flowers by Sweet Female Attitude, a fantastic classic track. And the featured artist was the Sugababes. This was the first time a Sugababes release with the name Sugababes had been released since 2011. And I stayed up till midnight on the album's release date to hear Flowers, and oh my god. I was emotional, I was so happy. I was just like, oh my god, I'm hearing the Sugababes. Like I've said before, they could be fucking singing Itsy Bitsy Spider and I'd still be like, probably crying about it. It was so exciting. And we got to see them perform it on the Graham Norton show, and they were promoting it. They were like, it was so good to see the Sugababes as an active entity again. And during this time, they confirmed that there was work for a celebration of the 20th anniversary of One Touch. As you can imagine, did get delayed due to the pandemic. You may have heard of it. But that actually leads us on quite nicely to present day. On the 1st of this month, we finally got our first Sugababes release in 11 years. Our first release we can hold in our hands, and that is, of course, the One Touch 20th anniversary release. And honestly, like, just so happy to, be living in a world where the Sugababes are an active entity again. I know the world is shit a lot of the time, but, when the Sugababes are in the world, it's a little bit less shit. And this release has come in a few formats as well. So we have, this is the double disc CD. This contains the original album remastered plus 4 new tracks. They're not new, they are from the One Touch sessions, so they're from 1999 and 2000, but they're new in the respect that we've never heard them before. So 4 previously unreleased demos, plus a bunch of remixes, some of which are brand new, made especially for this album, and some of which were released back in the day, but in very limited capacities, very rare, maybe on promo discs that weren't for sale, or on really limited edition releases. So this is a very fantastic compilation. We have it in this format. Also alongside this came the Overload signed CD. I don't know if you can tell, but it's signed there. And if you bought the album from Amazon as well, then you would have also got this exclusive 3rd disc, which features more remixes, plus 2 new demos as well. And I really love that it comes in one of those little sleeves that, like the promo singles used to come in back in the day. That is a very nice touch. A very nice One Touch, you could say. And finally, of course, we have a vinyl version as well. And this is just the original album. There's no extra tracks, but it is so lovely to have it because, just look at it, it's gorgeous. The inside, it's just so good. I love it. Having a new Sugababes release, even if it's not new, and it's old stuff, I still don't care. I'm just like, yes. And of course, I'm not going to give the full-on discography dive treatment to every single track on this reissue, but I'll highlight the new old tracks. There's Sometimes, which is a real cute sort of reggae-infused demo. It's very stripped back, very raw, but that's of course one of the greatest things about One Touch, as I believe I said this in my first video, that one of the great things about One Touch is that it is so unpolished. There's This Is What You Need, which is a little bit more funky, a little bit more R&B flavoured, somewhat ironically, very similar to what I could imagine could be on Angels and Dirty Faces after Siobhan left. That's a really good one. Another track we've got here is Girls Night Out, with night spelt N-I-T-E, because it's cool. This one's really cute, about just going on a girls' night out, which of course, when you can imagine when you're 15, 16, which is what they were when they recorded this, I imagine their idea of a girls' night out is probably like a school disco or something, or going to a friend's house maybe, and there's probably no alcohol involved. It's probably like Panda Pops and stuff like that. But it is really cute, and it's got these little spoken word bits in between, like little snippets of conversations with them, and like a bit I love with Keisha talking about a Cisco wannabe who had been like, you know, trying to get her attention all night, and she was like, oh yeah, he's nice, no, he's nice, he's really nice. I love it. The end of the track is just more of this spoken word, like conversation snippets, and she's like, oh, I did get a text back, so actually he did want to contact me. I love it. The last track on this main edition is one called Always Be the One, which is a very, very classic sounding late 90s girl band ballad. Probably got that, like, you know, kind of like beat to it. You could picture them doing it on top of the pops in like long coats and, you know, little points to the camera, and it's all very like slow and sensual. It's a little bit cheesy. It is, I mean, it's very sort of cliche pop ballad for the 90s, but they sound so amazing on it and so wonderful at such a young age as well, that it makes up for it. Like, I fully believe this, but like vocally, at least of their generation, vocally, no other girl group is touching them. Except for maybe Destiny's Child, but like with the Sugababes, you have 3 lead singers. They sounded fantastic back then, they sound fantastic now as well. We've also got 2 demos on the Amazon exclusive disc, one called The Other Side, which is, I have to be honest, I've only listened to it once because I haven't got a CD player, so my opportunities to listen have been quite limited. The other one, which is called All Around the World, which was actually a demo for a planned sort of second album with Siobhan before she jumped ship, not out of the toilet window. And All Around the World, it's got a very sort of dancey feel. Again, very late 90s, proper, you know, classic kind of feel. And it's really good, and it's just really interesting to me that it was, you know, a post One Touch demo, as it were. And of course, you know, One Touch, the reissue, has even outpeaked the original version, reaching number 18 in the albums chart. And that's amazing, considering it's virtually had very little promotion, with the exception of like the week of its release. And this is the first time that Siobhan's ever had a top 20 album, which is mad to think about because she's so talented, but there you go. And this whole release just makes me hungry and thirsty for a new album. Of course, now that they've at least, like, you know, ended that drought from like 2014 to 19. Like, fair enough, take your time, you know, get it right, of course. The prospect of a brand new Sugababes album in what will probably be 2022 at the earliest is very exciting to me, and you best believe I'll be pre-ordering every single edition, relentlessly streaming it. I'll be promoting it all over the shop, so watch out. And that wraps up our Sugababes discography dive season. I hope you have enjoyed, and I hope that if nothing else from watching these videos, you may have got an understanding as to why I love these 3 girls, as well as the 3 other girls, so much. The Sugababes will always have a special place in my heart. And whatever happens next, you know, I'm going to be there for the ride, and I hope you've enjoyed the series. And don't forget to subscribe so that you can be the first to know when my next discography dive series starts, and for all the other lovely little bits we're going to get in between. And until then, of course, I have been ElliXia Q Valentine, and of course, please book me. Mwah. Oh, that is nice. Oh. Can't do it.